Tonight, lunar landing. An American spacecraft touches down on the moon for the first time in over 50 years.
Houston, Odysseus has found his new home.
Celebrations on the ground and the Canadian technology on the mission.
Welcome to the moon.
An act of terror. The historic new ruling in the murder of a Muslim family.
The verdict will not bring back what was stolen.
Plus, angst and anger as serial killer Robert Pickton becomes eligible for day parole.
He doesn't deserve to take one step out.
Also, the cross-border breakthrough behind a record gun bust. And amazing discoveries deep underwater.
There's a lot of areas of the world that have never been seen and never been mapped.
The incredible images as more than 100 new species are found off the coast of Chile.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening, everyone. The moments before touchdown were tense, but tonight, more than 400,000 kilometers from the Earth, a U.S. spacecraft is on the moon, the first time in more than half a century. Built by an American company, it's now the first private lander to reach the lunar surface, touching down on the South Pole, where NASA eventually wants to send astronauts.
As our equipment is on the surface of the moon, and we are transmitting.
And let's bring in CTV's science and technology specialist, Dan Riskin, now. And what a nail-biter this was. And I know you had the same reaction that I did, which is, OK, they're clapping, but it wasn't a massive celebration. Why was that applause so muted?
It was muted, and I think it's because they weren't getting that beautiful signal. It was supposed to land, go silent for a few seconds, and then announce its arrival. And instead, they had a much longer silence and then a weak signal, and they weren't really clear where it was or what its status was. So they were glad that it landed, but I think they were hoping for a little bit of a clearer picture of what happened.
Now, Dan, just getting a lander on the moon is a huge deal. But what exactly will it do?
Well, the plan is, if everything's working, it collected a ton of data on landing, and so those data need to be sent back, and it'll last about a week until the sun sets. And the thing about the moon is that it takes 15 days for nighttime to go by, and then 15 days of sunlight. And so that sort of winter almost, that dark night, is going to be too much for this lander. So it's really only intended to do about a week of data collection after that landing. But the real question is whether all the beautiful data from the landing itself are going to get sent back.
Well, will it actually come here? And this, of course, isn't just about bragging rights, right? There's a lot of money at stake as well.
Yeah, I mean, NASA gave $118 million to Intuitive Machines to do this mission, and there's a lot more money where that came from to try to help NASA build their instruments for that Artemis mission. And so that's one piece of it. And of course, the moon has all kinds of, minerals that could be mined. And so there's big money in space exploration, and I think we're going to see a lot more activity in that direction.
All right, we'll be watching. Dan Riskin, thank you so much for this tonight.
Thank you.
To a landmark legal ruling now, and the 5 life sentences handed down to a self-described white nationalist who intentionally drove his truck into a Muslim family in London, Ontario. The judge said the attack represented an act of terrorism, the first time that finding has been made against a far-right extremist in Canada. CTV's Nick Paparella on the pivotal day and the deep and lingering pain.
So I decided, all right, this is it. I'm gonna commit a terrorist attack.
After being found guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder, Justice Renee Pomerantz agreed with what Veltman told police, saying, "I find the offender's actions constitute terrorist activity." Justice Pomerantz ruled that this was a planned and deliberate attack aimed at intimidating a segment of society, the Muslim community.
And to the terrorist, your hate may have taken 4 beautiful lives and almost a 5th, but it will not win.
For Afzal family members, the ruling is a small sense of relief.
Missing our family that should have been here and are not, and something that we'll be working through processing as time goes on.
Veltman, a white nationalist, was already facing 4 concurrent life sentences for the murders, and Justice Pomerantz gave him an additional life sentence for the attempted murder of the young boy who survived the attack. The terrorism designation makes it far tougher for Veltman to be released from prison even after serving 25 years. His defense team didn't rule out an appeal in this case.
We'll see whether we'll get instructions from our client about whether or not there'll be an appeal.
2.5 years after the brutal incident, a memorial now stands as a constant reminder of what happened. Those who became known as our London family may be gone, but they will never be forgotten.
Every time I pass by, I remember her. So the memories, they don't close.
Nick Paparella, CTV News, London, Ontario.
Family and friends of the victims of one of Canada's most notorious serial killers are also experiencing reignited trauma. They're outraged that Robert Pickton, charged with murdering 26 women, is now eligible to apply for day parole. BC Bureau Chief Andrew Johnson on the renewed anguish.
2 decades have passed since a police raid at Robert Pickton's Port Coquitlam pig farm revealed the dismembered remains, or DNA, of dozens of women, including Stephanie Lane. For her mom, Michelle, time has not healed old wounds.
I've been living in hell. It's been horrible. I always say that I am living in a Stephen King novel.
Lane is believed to be Pickton's youngest victim. She was 20, her mother experiencing fresh grief last night during a vigil at the farm site ahead of a day they've been dreading.
I want you to have a look at this poster.
Pickton, who was sentenced to life in prison in 2007 for 6 killings, can now apply for day parole.
Pickton should not walk on this earth. He doesn't deserve to take one step out of where he is. He needs to stay where he is until he dies.
Pickton is now 74, and it's unclear if he plans to pursue day parole. His longtime lawyer isn't providing comment, and the Parole Board of Canada is confirming no hearing has been scheduled. Legal experts believe it's unlikely the man who hunted vulnerable sex workers on Vancouver's downtown east side will ever be released.
I don't think that they're going to make a decision very lightly, and certainly not without considering the very deep impact.
Impact that now spans generations for people like Lily, who lost her aunt.
I really, really wanted to know her growing up, and it's really affected me.
This is just the latest blow for these families. They're also fighting an RCMP plan to destroy evidence related to the Pickton investigation, fearing that could close the door for good on the dozens of still unsolved disappearances linked to that pig farm. Omar.
All right, Andrew, thank you. And just about an hour south of that Port Coquitlam pig farm, a community has been shaken by terrifying gun violence. A barrage of gunfire aimed at a black SUV erupted overnight in White Rock. The driver tried to escape but crashed into a fence. Police say the targeted shooting left 4 people seriously injured. One of the gunmen appeared to be wielding an assault-style weapon. Those types of weapons are part of what police in Ontario today are calling the largest illegal weapons bust in the province's history. CTV's Kamel Karmali with more on the sophisticated smuggling pipeline detected with the help of American law enforcement.
Dozens of handguns, assault rifles, silencers, and hundreds of rounds of ammunition, all part of the largest illegal gun bust in Ontario's history.
Illegal firearms like these are used in violent crimes, such as robberies, carjackings.
The Ontario Provincial Police announced their joint investigation with U.S. Homeland Security resulted in over 250 illegal firearms seized, more than half of those found by investigators in the United States heading into Canada, and over 100 guns seized by law enforcement in Ontario.
Evidence was gathered in relation to the trafficking of illegal firearms by 5 distinct criminal networks.
Those networks trying to create a smuggling pipeline coming from Florida using the Buffalo border.
Within days or even sometimes hours, all of the illegal firearms would be sold.
But the flow of guns, a problem across the country, experts say won't be solved without help from federal bodies.
We need the RCMP to be engaged as well, and due to some funding issues and resource issues, they're not as engaged as most of the members would like to be.
Today, Ottawa announcing more than $4 million to combat gun crime in Vancouver, investing in community-led projects for youth, but no new funds for securing borders.
I'll be working with my federal colleagues and looking at how we can better support their efforts to combat this crime.
For this historic bust in Ontario, there have been 16 arrests and nearly 300 charges laid. But with Canada's so-called catch and release justice system under heavy scrutiny, there's ongoing pressure to make sure that these criminals aren't back out repeating the same offenses. Omar.
All right, Kamal, thanks. Calgary-based Lynx Air revealed late tonight it is grounding its planes as of Monday after seeking creditor protection. The airline says higher fuel and operating costs are creating the financial turbulence, forcing it to shut down less than 2 years after it took off. The news comes ahead of the busy March break travel season. Lynx passengers should contact their credit card company, the airline says, for refunds. The mother of Alexei Navalny, Vladimir Putin's fiercest critic, said today she has finally been able to see her son's body in a Siberian morgue, but is being pressured to agree to a secret burial. Western leaders have pointed the finger at Putin, and now, ahead of the 2-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Washington is expected to impose a fresh round of sanctions on Moscow. CTV's Heather Wright is on the ground in Kyiv tonight.
Russia released this video today showing soldiers in the city of Avdiivka, which they captured over the weekend after months of heavy fighting. The fall of this key eastern city marks the biggest shift to battle line since May of last year and comes at a time when Ukraine is in need of more soldiers and more ammunition. From the sky, drone pilots patrol Russia's next move. It doesn't end with them taking Avdiivka, he says. The villages nearby are next, then the larger towns. Ukraine claimed its own victory today, saying it killed 60 Russian soldiers in a strike on a training compound in occupied territory in the east. But as the war stretches into its third year, aid is not flowing as freely as it once did, with many, including Canadians, divided on how much money should be sent to Ukraine. Today, Denmark pledged nearly $250 million and urged allies to give now when the need is big, not later. A $61 billion aid package remains stalled in the U.S. Congress, a bill President Joe Biden has urged lawmakers to pass. Today, he met with the wife and daughter of Alexei Navalny, the outspoken critic of Russian President Vladimir Putin, who died last week in a penal colony near the Arctic Circle.
He was a man of incredible courage. And it's amazing how his wife and daughter are emulating that.
And after days, Navalny's mother was finally able to see her son's body. But she says Russian authorities are trying to blackmail her into burying his body secretly. They want to take me to the confines of a cemetery near a fresh grave and tell me, here lies your son, she says. I do not agree with this.
Navalny's supporters say his mother was shown his death certificate today, which claims he died of natural causes. Russia is expected to ramp up its crackdowns on dissent and its fighting in Ukraine ahead of next month's presidential elections. Widely considered, Omar, a mere formality.
All right, Heather Wright in Kyiv tonight. To the conflict in the Middle East, UN agencies, aid groups, and European countries are all calling for a ceasefire. They're warning that an Israeli assault on Rafah in southern Gaza would be a disaster for civilians. More than 1.4 million Palestinians are crammed in the area. Israel says Hamas militants are hiding there, holding hostages kidnapped on October 7th. Calls for a ceasefire are also coming from hundreds of Muslim organizations in Canada, who reinforced that demand today in an open letter to members of Parliament, this time with an ultimatum. CTV's Michael Couture explains.
Shame, shame. Frustration with the federal government has been building in the Muslim community. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was jeered on the anniversary of the Quebec City mosque shooting earlier this year. And now a national Muslim group is telling all members of Parliament if they don't make certain pledges, they won't be welcome in their houses of worship during Ramadan.
This doesn't just come down to the federal government. This comes down to all parties, civil society.
Signed by more than 300 Muslim groups, including leadership at prominent mosques across the country, the letter asks that before any MPs go to a community gathering, they commit to calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. that MPs condemn what the organization says are war crimes carried out by Israel, and the group is demanding the resumption of funding to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. Last month, Canada and other allies suspended funding for UNRWA in response to allegations that agency staff were involved in the October 7th attack on Israel.
You can't even say that they should rectify a situation where you have 500,000 people that are on the brink of starvation and death.
Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland points out the Liberal government has called for a ceasefire in Gaza, while the opposition Conservatives have not.
I really do recognize how painful this is for the Muslim community.
Freeland adds it's up to community leaders to choose who they want to meet. It's worth noting the National Council of Canadian Muslims canceled a meeting with the Prime Minister last month. And while politicians are the target of this letter, some who signed it say it's not a political fight.
There is a plausible genocide that is unfolding before our very eyes, and it needs to stop.
Liberal MP Salma Zahid, who is Muslim, told me while the community is hurting, she believes the dialogue with MPs should not be cut off. Omar?
All right, Mike, thank you. In Montreal, dozens of pro-Palestinian supporters gathered at McGill University today. Students blocked the entrance to the Faculty of Management building, named after Jewish philanthropist Stephen Bronfman. They want the university to divest from interests in Israel. The demonstration drew a sharp response from Federal Minister Mark Miller, who called it, quote, despicable. Coming up.
Does this committee really think I can be bribed for a $17 knapsack?
Civil servants suspended over the ArriveCan scandal cry foul. Two suspended federal government workers defended themselves at a parliamentary committee today. They're at the center of the ArriveCan controversy and insist they're being unfairly targeted. CTV's Judy Trin on the tense testimony.
Two senior public servants entangled in allegations of shady procurement deals and hidden payments. They deny it all.
Is this bribery? Does this committee really think I can be bribed for a $17 knapsack?
Every single allegation, false, wrong, and taken out of context.
When the ArriveCan app was created, it initially cost $80,000, but it was plagued by technical glitches and costs ballooned to nearly $60 million. The app required maintenance by an army of consultants. Contracts were signed without proper paperwork.
There will be, there are investigations and there will be consequences.
The Canada Border Services Agency used the app to track travelers who arrived in Canada during the pandemic. CBSA investigated after being alerted to cozy ties between public servants and contractors. That led to Antonio Utano and Cameron McDonald being suspended without pay.
There were no facts. It was a collection of allegations which was put together specifically to discredit Mr. Utano and Mr. McDonald.
But the Auditor General says those involved in ArriveCan displayed a glaring disregard of the rules and has referred the matter to the Mounties.
Mr. McDonald, are you being investigated by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police?
I don't believe that I am.
Mr. Utano?
Same. I have not been contacted. I'm not aware of any being under any investigation.
In addition to what's going on in Parliament, a class action lawsuit has been filed on behalf of Canadians who use the faulty ArriveCan app. According to the Auditor General, more than 10,000 travelers were wrongly instructed to quarantine. Omar.
All right, Judy, thank you. Still ahead, fearing the consequences.
Is that murder?
Fertility clinics suspend operations after an Alabama court ruling. A new snapshot tonight is revealing a staggering jump in the number of young Canadians who were sent to hospital last winter because of the flu. More than 2,400 children were hospitalized between 2022 and 2023, compared to 33 the previous year. The new data confirms numbers are returning to pre-pandemic levels now that quarantine measures have lifted. More clinics in Alabama have paused fertility treatments after the state's Supreme Court ruled embryos are people. CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malbin on the doctors and patients in limbo.
In Alabama, these frozen embryos are legally children. After the High Court ruled they are, ripping open a deeply emotional and personal debate in America.
When I saw this ruling, I got
very angry and very hurt.
After 3 miscarriages, in vitro fertilization is Gabby Godell and her husband's last shot at having a family. Now forced to go out of state to continue her treatment after Alabama's largest hospital suspended its fertility program, and several more clinics, including hers, followed suit.
People need to know that this is affecting couples, real life couples who are trying to start families. You're stopping us from having a child.
The Republican Alabama Supreme Court, invoking God and the Bible, shook reproductive medicine when the court ruled that frozen embryos qualify as people, and anyone who discards them could now face criminal charges, meaning that doctors like Mamie McLean could be held liable for wrongful death for discarding unused or not viable frozen embryos.
It leaves those of us who are sitting face to face with patients just with the inability to comment on what is safe and what is legal for them right now.
In the race to be president, Republican Nikki Haley under fire for saying this.
I mean, embryos to me are babies.
Later trying to walk a more moderate line.
I didn't say that I agreed with the Alabama ruling.
The Biden campaign blasting the ruling as outrageous and unacceptable.
The access to reproductive health care through IVF is being taken from countless individuals and families.
Alabama's ruling is already a hot-button election issue. The fear now is that the chilling effect on fertility care could spread to other conservative states. Joy Malvin, CTV News, Washington.
After the break, breakthrough discoveries deep in the ocean. We end tonight the same way we began, with more remarkable firsts. Marine researchers have discovered more than 100 new species, including marine animals, sea urchins, glass sponges, and deep-sea corals off the coast of Chile. 4 underwater mountains with their own unique ecosystems were also discovered, while mapping more than 52,000 kilometers of seafloor in the Southeast Pacific.
We believe through our observations, we've increased the number of known species for this region by roughly 34%, possibly more. And that's all biodiversity that we had no clue existed.
The incredible discoveries were made possible with the help of an underwater robot capable of reaching depths of more than 4.5 kilometers below the surface of the ocean. And a first, too, for James Cameron. The Oscar-winning filmmaker was invested as a companion of the Order of Canada, the highest level. Cameron, who directed blockbusters like Titanic and Avatar, was recognized for his contributions to the film industry, environmental activism, and sustainable farming. Congratulations. And that's a snapshot of this Thursday. Heather is here tomorrow. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching, and good night.